Like Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to Cambodia Economic Growth Policy Dialogue. Today I had the pleasure to have an old friend, Michael Tan, former ambassador to Singapore, but now, doing something more exciting, which is in the private sector. And Michael, you're the chair of Aquarii, right? Yes. And also another old friend, David Van, a well-known private sector, diehard private sector view, and he's very involved in the new area of private sector thing, ESG, all this sort of thing, impact investment, that sort of thing. I will not try to describe what you're doing, but throughout the conversation, we will have an opportunity to talk. Today is pretty much about economic resilience. It's about market diversification, product diversification, in the context of a very dynamic global, regional, and even national context. So let me start with you, Michael. Give me a bit of background, because I mean you're a former ambassador to Cambodia. What year was that?
Well, I was the ambassador to Cambodia from 2016 to 2020. My term ended during the COVID year of 2020. As I would joke with my Cambodian friends, right? Essentially during COVID, I forgot to leave after that. So I've stayed on. In fact, I've been in Cambodia now for slightly more than 9 years.
Wow.
Coming into the 10th year now. I decided to stay on because I saw that there was a need to be one of the bridges between Cambodia and the international community, especially for the businesses and investors. Because I feel that there's a lot of noises out there, and there tend to be somewhat negative perception or outdated perspective about Cambodia's development. I felt that there was a need that I could help to address from the private sector capacity, as opposed to be from the government side. But of course, it's not all altruistic. It's also an opportunity for me to extend my own runway, to fulfill some of my personal ambition of dabbling in the private sector before I get too old and become too inflexible, to be able to operate in the wider circle. And so I've stayed on since then.
Yeah. So I mean, extending the runway of your career path, that's a good metaphor there. But David, you have always been in the private sector.
Yes. Never actually. Although I ventured for a number of years into the UN development world, but then after that 2.5 years working for a UN agency in Geneva, I decided to quit, back to the private sector, but still doing a lot of consulting work for the UN all the way until now. But primarily it's more private sector related activities, mostly on, like you just described, the ESG thematics, helping Cambodian SME become more ESG aware and ready, then handhold them to produce some sort of bankable, sustainable investment proposal, which we then go and help raise fund for them to expand their business.
Michael, I think you, in your tenure as ambassador in Cambodia, you have seen the Cambodia of the mid 2010, okay? But you have to go backward a bit more to the 1993, and then leading to the WTO days. So what, during your tenure, it was a period where Cambodia have already sort of take off already. The WTO day in the early 2000s was really the beginning, the taxiway, yeah. But now fast forward to today, we're more like flying already. We're not in autopilot yet, but you see the transformation from your perspective?
Oh, for sure. In fact, when I arrived in Cambodia in 2016, that was June 2016. I remember at that time, even back in Singapore was still debating about pay now. Foodpanda was already operating. But that was one of the first food deliveries in Singapore. Uber was operating, but there were a lot of protests from the taxi unions, and Grab Taxi was also in operation. They were considering moving their headquarters from KL to Singapore. But when I arrived in Cambodia in June 2016, I was shocked. Right, I'm supposed to be coming from a first world country, but when I came here, I was totally unprepared. Of all the briefings, the reports, the publications that I went through before I assumed post, right? When I arrived here, what shocked me was that there were so many e-payment systems, food deliveries, ride-hailing apps were abundant and so were commonplace, right? So I felt truly like a country bumpkin, you know. Not to disparage Cambodia, but I was really caught off guard. And that already was instructive, that something deeper was happening here, right? And that led me to spend the following 6 months after I assumed duty to really go down to the ground. Right? Certain days I'll be sitting at cafes, pubs and what have you, right? Not that I was skiving, but I was really trying to understand from the ground up, what was it that I've missed? What was it that all the previous reports, observers, anecdotal accounts and so on were not able to capture? And I found that buried under tons of negative news about Cambodia, that's when I started to find the real truth. If you recall, back in 2016, right, that was one of the last years for the Millennium Development Goals before it transited to the UN SDG, right? Cambodia was the star performer for the MDBs, right? For the MDGs. And when I checked around with some of my friends in the international organization circuit, a lot of them were telling me that it's not so sexy to talk about Cambodia in that good light. I was like, but you are doing good work. It's also a testament of your good work, right? But why are you not talking more about it? Then when I started to piece together all these accounts and all this feedback, I started to realize that Cambodia in a way was disadvantaged because of the political narrative out there for whatever reasons, right? Maybe, you know, the cliche is that negative news sell faster than positive news and so on. So it's a mixed bag. But that was when I started to realize that there's something deeper happening here, something more fundamental that I need to get to the root of. And so you're right. The economic transformation is amazing. I think there's no parallel in terms of the digitalization. Right, even blockchain, adoption of blockchain. MBC launched Bakong. I believe that is one of the world's first blockchain in terms of the digital currency, backed by the National Bank. And there are a lot of firsts in digitalization. Niam 24 started out as one of the early birds in the region, definitely. Today, last year, David is a Grab advisor to Grab, was procured. Right. So all these are testament of the economic transformation that Cambodia is already going through. Very quietly.
That's more the so-called the new emerging economy, right? But back to David, from your days in the traditional economy, how do you see the transformation? Because the way I see after the war, we were left with nothing. No knowledge, no money, no saving, no experience. You just emerge from the war, you know, and then you have the garment industry starting slowly. But then what other thing that you've seen? Of course, we're heavy into distribution because the country needs everything. Right. So any Ongya in Cambodia who have exclusive product of one toothpaste, of toothbrush, he suddenly became rich overnight because he have national distribution. And that's the story of many Ongya. But they're in the service industry, huh?
Yes. But, you know, primarily speaking, like you said, in the old days, in the old economy, I call it this way. Because today we are in the digital economy, so a different ball game, right? So in the old economy, people operate in a different manner. I call it old school methodology. Compared to today in the digital era, you need to get things to move very fast, and things keep on changing. You cannot be complacent. You know, the moment you reach this milestone, things change, and then you have to run to reach another milestone again. So it's a constant, rapidly changing environment in this digital era. We talk about AI, talk about robotics, so it's a different ball game. But coming back to the our sort of a group of Oknya. So you have this old school Oknya in the old economy platform, and then we have today a different, a younger generation of Oknya. So the difference is that today the younger generation, they are a lot more open in terms of mindset. They are a lot more habilitated to try new things as compared to the old school generation who are very uncomfortable doing something that they bring them out of the comfort zone. So they just stick to what they think they know. But then again, what you did well in the past is today outdated. So you need to change and sort of reskill or upskill yourself in order to thrive in the new digital economy. And I think today the younger generation of Oknya, those who are in their late 30s or mid 40s, they are learning how to readapt and how to sort of reskill themselves to catch up with the rapidly changing environment.
Michael, I mean, from Singapore is one of the, I would say by now is the number one investor in Cambodia. Singapore, no?
No, it's still in the top three, if I'm not wrong, but it's not number one.
Okay. But, you know, from, when I look at Singapore, I look at the, number one is the first world. I mean, let's face it, in many different aspects. But you do bring a lot of sense of technological advancement in many of the product development, many, for example, special economic zone, you start with China, right? You're the first one who started in China. But so I look at Singapore as a model of how a small country could grow in a matter of 50-some years from a least developed country to a developed country, skipping the developing world even, right? What is Singapore model?
Well, I think, first of all, just one clarification. I think the Singapore government still look at ourselves as, still identify ourselves as one of the developing countries, all right? But I mean, it's a matter of the technical definition. But the fact
an
that,
OECD country?
well, we have not been a member of OECD.
Oh, okay.
But coming back to the question about the Singapore model, I think we were also fortunate that we had visionary leaders. But if I were to mention about the economic industrialization development policy in our early founding days, right? In the 1950s to 60s, we actually went into import substitution, which is the call by many quarters even today, because of domestic stresses, because of global uncertainty and so on. But that was the period of time when big countries like Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, India, Pakistan also went into import substitution. But I think they abandoned it by the 1980s to 1990s after decades of stagnation. The more successful cases were the Asian success stories, right? You have Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore,
the flying
Vietnam. Yeah. So these economies, although Japan had quite a different context for Japan because their import substitution strategy actually started after the Meiji Restoration. But even then, all these Asian success stories pivoted to export-oriented policies, export promotion and growth. By the 1970s, right, or late 1960s. Singapore was the fastest to pivot. In fact, we did so within a decade. So other countries, they took a much longer time to pivot. Singapore saw the ills of import substitution and then started to gear up its industry to attract value chain, value supply chain, and to build an ecosystem for manufacturing. That was, I think, one of the key fundamentals that allowed Singapore's model to be successful. What is striking about the examples that I gave, right, is that, you know, when I mentioned about Brazil, Mexico, India, Pakistan, these are huge markets, huge populations, average between 50 plus to 200 plus million people. Vastly larger than Cambodia's 17 million. Sure. But Cambodia's market is really bigger than Singapore, 17 million in terms of numbers. Maybe not in terms of economic value, but in terms of the numbers. And when you talk about SEZ, just now we were talking about SEZ, and you're also talking about the SEZ, how Singapore has exported this model to China. In fact, across Southeast Asia, India, Vietnam, Indonesia, in Bintan, Batam, and so on, also adopted or was inspired by the Singapore model because we were able to attract the value supply chain, build up the ecosystem for subcomponent manufacturing to support the finished product, because we recognize that the global economy has fundamentally changed. It's no longer about the exchange of finished goods. It is about trading know-how, about collaboration in manufacturing. Going up the value chain from labor-intensive to light medium manufacturing, and then incorporating it with what David has also mentioned earlier, technology transfer. And that, I think, is, in a way, the differentiator of the Singapore economic model.
Well, David, we're talking about diversification, versus import substitution. I don't like the word import substitution because as somebody who negotiated WTO, it's not something cool. And our market is too small anyway to substitute. But having said that, I want to find a similar wording, which is more market diversification, right? Which is a more appropriate word, because we have at some point developed manufacturing capability anyway. When you mentioned that, Singapore sort of make the shift, Cambodia didn't have a choice because after we emerged from the war, we have nothing to protect. So we just jump straight to export. By default, we have no choice but to export, right? But then when you export, you attract FDI, and FDI produce and export. But it means that the local are not in that export industry. They benefit indirectly as being the landlord, the truck provider, the labor provider, whatever, it's fine, right? But they are not directly, right? So, David, my question to you is, how do you see now the focus on diversification, the local industry to move to manufacturing, to more value added, I take, for example, the cashew. We only sell the nuts, but the apple and the rest is going to waste. But there's so much byproduct that you can do with cashew. For example.
That's why try was nuts.
Yeah.
All this one, right? Joke apart. But look, I think what we should look at now is to how can Cambodia find ways, by relooking internally, find ways to build a more what I term as domestic economic resilience, cutting out the import substitution, whereby what I meant by domestic resilience economy is we today are importing a lot of product that actually could be produced locally.
Okay.
Right? So the key is you're talking about how can our local business people or manufacturer be able to tag along this sort of a FDI thing for export. And all this while, we have this inability to do so because of our own weakness to meet the specific stringent norms that are related to export market. One of the norms is, of course, ESG, for instance, right? We sell primarily and still a lot to Western-related market like EU, Canada, Australia, US, which the buyers and the consumers are very particular on where they buy, how the product is being made, even for the agricultural product, how did you, cultivate that? Is the soil, organic? All the sort of ESG related thing has to be addressed by the local producer. So that's why we have been trying in the past to, again, help the local SMEs become number one ESG ready, aware and ready, and then we help them build their business model to capture all these various criteria to address the ESG demand, and then hook them up with foreign investor or foreign manufacturer who come in, and these people are looking for credible local partners. But you can only be a credible local partner if you upgrade yourself to play the game at that level, right? So that's what we have been trying to do, is to help local companies upgrade themselves so that they can be viewed as credible local partner for the foreign investor. I mean, take the example, if a company from, say, Australia want to invest here to manufacture something for re-export, of course they need a local partner to help them do the sourcing, to help them handle the supply chain. But the local partner also must be able to be on par in terms of thinking, in terms of norms, in terms of standard of quality. Otherwise, you are not qualified to be the local partner of the foreign players.
Yeah. If I can just jump in. I agree in broad strokes with what David has shared, and is admirable and commendable in terms of gearing up the ESG readiness of the SMEs and so on. But this strategy needs to be done in parallel with other fundamentals for the industry here. If I draw a parallel between the Singapore early days of industrial development with Cambodia's, no doubt the context is slightly different. Cambodia were basically thrown into the deep end, right? You have to either either swim or sink, right? Now, but there are parallels in the sense that both are relatively small markets. We have Singapore has no natural resource, whereas Cambodia at that time were deprived of the natural resource, but then it began to have that natural resource now. But the problem is, how do you make use of the natural resource, right? Now, when you look at the development model for Singapore, we are also net importer.
In what way?
We are dependent on imports for almost all our needs, But what we saw was that if we do not attract the value supply chain in, if we do not build the ecosystem for manufacturing, it will end up being just a manufacturing hub for a single product, right? Now, Cambodia, you're right. Cambodia already has export-oriented policies. Maybe not by choice at the beginning, but it was a good thing, right, to have export-oriented promotion and growth in the industries. But the problem that Cambodia faces is that it is stuck in low-value assembly, right? You talk about complete knockdown automobile assembly plant. It's good. It's still good, right? It's a good starting point. Now you have about 7 to 9 automobile assembly plants. Then you have the cut, make and trim, garment industry and so on. Good for employment and so on, but not so good in the longer term when it comes to skill upgrading. You need to move from labor intensive, low value, up the value chain. Just now you mentioned about cashew nut export. Actually, it's not just cashew nut export. It's the whole cashew. The cashew, right? We know who will come over, cut up everything, bring it over. Now, for just the sake of reference, right? My understanding is that on average, annually, Cambodia will export about 1.9 million tons, plus minus, to Vietnam, for example. The average price would be about 1,400 per ton, right? Now, when Vietnam has processed it, just the kernel, don't talk about the rest of the cashew tree and so on, right? Just the kernel itself, after they process it, package it, and exported it, you know what's the market value? On average, 8,000 per ton, right?
6 times.
Yeah, so if you just focus on the 1.9 million, right, it means that you are losing more than 12 to 13 B every single year, not considering what you can do for the rest of the apple and so on, because it can be done, it can be used for cosmetic, pharmaceutical, and so on and so forth, right? Now,
and
12 to 13 B is not small change, it's a huge chunk of Cambodia's GDP. So what is instructive is that if the cashew industry can start to gear up towards higher value, value adding, which is what the Pentagonal strategy, having tagged agricultural sector as one of the priority sectors, you can start to do. But you can't do it on your own.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to attract FDI, I agree with David. You need to have the right conditions to attract FDI. But investors are always risk averse. And few investors will come in to build the ecosystem for you.
Yeah.
So Cambodia need to take action to revisit some of the strategies that it has in terms of attracting FDI. Have the right condition, right? Gear up. So for automobile, for example, you need to go upstream.
Yeah.
Right? Now for a car, I think a German car, right? You require more than 200, you require parts for more than 200 plus global suppliers. Just a smartphone also require at least global supplier from 20 over sources and so on. But for the car components, for example, there are subcomponents that can be manufactured here. For the garment industry, your buttons, your lapels, and other fabric dyeing and so on, design can be done here. But you need to have incentive program to motivate the industries, the existing industry, to actually gear up.
Yeah, so it's a lot about the ecosystem and supply chain for that matter, because at the end of the day, Cambodia basically, let's face it, aside from the agricultural side where we have abundance of supply, but in terms of manufacturing, we don't have that much. We don't have that much.
Right. But then you can, so at the macro level, there's a two-pronged strategy that's worth considering, right? I mean, at the macro level, build on existing industries that are already showing success.
Yeah.
So, for example, automobile assembly, your garment.
Yeah.
And there's one more which is not talked about as much, and that, for example, is furniture making. You have already in existence diverse manufacturing facilities, investors that are in town. Cambodia is increasingly looked upon as one of the suppliers for IKEA, for example. And made in Cambodia product, whether it's agriculture to furniture and so on, right? There will be increasing acceptance, especially when you pair it with the ESG, SDG, sustainable goal. So build on existing industry, but you need to attract the value chain in. Start small, but it is a good place to start. The other one, when you mentioned, is about agriculture. That is the second strategy. Leverage on what you already have in country, your hinterland, natural resources, which Singapore doesn't have. We have to even create technology to be able to be self-sufficient in terms of water.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So for Cambodia, yes, abundance of natural resource. The thing is to be selective. So cashew obviously is a cash crop, right? You have pepper and so on. Now it's also about attracting the value chain. Pepper is more developed because you have the design, the packaging, the R&D and so on, right? In fact, for Samai Ram, gin and so on, you already have the R&D thing, but it's to develop the value chain to bring in. If you can replicate this for automobile, garments, furniture, it's a fantastic place to start because the base is already there.
I think the trick is also how to scale up, because if you have quality but the volume is so little, you cannot really make an impact. You have to look at model where you can scale up. David?
Scale up and skill up.
Scale up and skill up.
I lead me to follow up on Michael's point about skill. The skill manpower, right? In order to attract the relevant FDI, we must be able to offer a proper pool of skilled manpower. So we are now talking also about a large number of Khmer returnees from Thailand because of this border crisis we have with the next door neighbor. So these people, in fact, after so many years working in Thailand, they already acquire certain type of skill. But when they come back here, it may not be easy to find employers that could tap into their existing skill that they acquire over the last few years they work overseas. So there's a need to reskill or upskill these people in order for them to move on. So it's all about now how can the government develop a more attuned TVET program. He mentioned a lot about the automobile industry. In fact, I was also hired recently by a client who has a public-private partnership with Ministry of Labor and Vocational Training to establish what we call the automotive center of excellence for Cambodia, whereby the automotive center of excellence is actually a brand name from a very reputable Victorian government institution in Melbourne that are having good track record in transforming the automotive sector.
Okay.
By professionalizing your mechanic engineering and so on and so forth. So this is what we want to replicate for Cambodia, for the automotive sector, right? But besides this, we are talking about furniture making. The Cambodians have very nimble hand. They're also good in carpentry somehow. But you need to really bring them over through a program to make them a lot more professional. So that then,
High precision.
yes, so that then we can provide that kind of pool of labor to whoever want to invest and manufacture furniture.
I think furniture is high profit. Eh?
Yes, it is.
I mean, particularly if you aim for advanced market, you know, you can really sell a table that you can sell here for $50, $5,000 in some of this country. But you need precision, you need good quality, craftsmanship. But nowadays, with all the technology, you can do it.
You know, when you talk about high profit, right, in terms of furniture making, I'll give you one very simple example. Mattresses.
Mattresses, yeah. Cambodia export mattresses.
I'm not sure whether they export because you have some export tariffs that need to be reviewed as well, because I think there's some disincentive when it comes to certain products for export. But in terms of mattresses, for example, right, you look at the pricing in Singapore, you cannot find a mattress that's under $1,000, right? Most of them, the better quality, of course, it can be up to 10,000 and above. Now, in the market here,
when you sleep there, you go to heaven.
Right.
You feel luxurious.
You feel every cent must be worth it when you take each roll, you know. But in Cambodia, even in the market, right, I think minimum is 300 plus to 500, right? Especially for spring pocketed ones.
Yeah.
But I understand that there are already OEM factories which are here.
Oh, really?
From China, from other countries, right? Now, again, it's single product because they import the components to assemble them. But they like the fact that Cambodians, like what David mentioned, right? Nimble hands. They know how to assemble it and they learn very quickly. But you need to gear them up towards the next stage. Now, imagine just using this example of mattress. You know what OEM factories can produce for? The cost of it, less than $200.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Some even cheaper, depending on the scale, depending on the type and so on. But this presents itself as a huge potential. And that's only one component, because you have custom furniture, you have kitchen cabinets, you have composite, what's that called? Wood chips that you press together for partitions and so on. So the strategy, I think, that Cambodia really needs to look at, rather than build from scratch, because, like I said, investors are risk averse. It's going to be very tough, challenging to expect them to be able to build that value chain for you. What would be easier, or easier in that sense, right, is to attract the value chain in, to incentivize them.
Okay.
What Singapore did in the early days, and I think it's been replicated in the SEZ models in other countries, using Singapore as a benchmark, right? If you gear your tax incentive, whereas right now in Cambodia, the QIP is based on the timeline, according to certain quantum of investment and what sector. But if you go by the Singapore model, they incentivize you in terms of the value chain that you bring in. So, for example, for car assembly right now, it's knocked down. But if you now have a tax incentive to tell the automobile assembly plants, if you bring in R&D, like what you're doing right now in terms of skill training and so on, or if you bring in one sub-component for the car, instead of importing all the parts in, right, one sub-component will be manufactured here or assembled here. But now you are value adding incrementally.
Okay.
You get more tax incentive. If you hire a certain quota of Cambodians of a particular skill set, you get another incentive and so on. So it is performance based, right? And it can become an amplifier to attract others in. Now, the other strategy that, if I try to recall from the Singapore model, is that SEZs, for example, are sector specific. so that the ecosystem has a greater chance of leveraging on one another. We were very fortunate that our leaders had the advice of Dr. Winston Mears from the Netherlands, right? And of course, close bilateral relations with Japan at the time. And I think when Matsushita and others came in, they not only brought in their single product manufacturing, they brought in the whole supply chain ecosystem. And that caused the industry to revolutionize. And that was why Singapore quickly pivoted from just attracting manufacturer single product or low value assembly into more export oriented. Because once he has a supply chain in, it's already about diversification of import, market diversification, and then you're looking at export. That's what Cambodia should really look at. Most SEZs right now, it's a mix of different sectors, right? Very well run by the Royal Group, Phnom Penh SEZ, the one in Sihanoukville that the Chinese helped to start, fantastically well done. Now the next model will be sector specific. To promote that ecosystem building for the manufacturing. And then you can start to attract in the value chain. But if you have the right tax incentive, that's performance-based.
Performance-based. Yeah, because the Prime Minister have spoken quite a bit about sector-specific, and for example, for the agro-industry, cashew in Kapong Thom is a sector-specific, as he said, that we want to do that. But from your experience, Michael, look at in your 9 year here, what sort of product or sector that you think have potential to really take off?
Well, those are the two that I mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah.
Furniture making, like I said, it's not talked about as much. Really need to take a deep look at it. Give the different OEM factories incentives to co-locate together. Bring in the value chain, upstream and downstream, because then you have designers, R&D, logistics, promotion, and so on, right? Agriculture is huge. I mean, Singaporeans or the Singapore government will be salivating when they look at the hinterland that Cambodia has. Not just your cash crops, but I mean, we always joke before, right? If Cambodia were to go through severe hard times, right, we'll just move to the countryside, you throw the seeds of vegetable, fruits, and it will grow because it has been tested by so many researchers from all over the world that Cambodia has one of the most fertile soil in the world, right? And so with that sort of hinterland, natural resource that you have, now it's about how can you encourage a cultivation of a larger scale, but yet bring in the value chain that can help gear up in terms of knowledge, leveraging on technology. We mentioned about AI, right? Leverage on technology, using drones and so on to monitor the health. Is it one harvest year or is it 2 harvest year and yield and so on, right? So all this can be built up. So agriculture cannot be overlooked. But don't just focus on the cashew. You can use cashew as the trial.
It's one crop.
Yeah, use cashew as a trial. Pepper as well. Develop that value chain, the ecosystem, use the learning points from there, and then quickly replicate it across the other agricultural classes. Even your banana, your mango. Mango itself, you have more than 100 varieties, if I'm not wrong. Banana, tens of varieties, right? So quite a lot of prospect in those areas. Of course, the other one that David has mentioned, digitalization. Because remember my earlier example when I first came here, right? I was shocked by the early adoption. This is something which continues to be underrated by the international media. But digitalization now means that Cambodia potentially can go into what we call BPO, business process outsourcing. If you recall, right, at one point in time, Vietnam was heavily tapped on for animation, website designs, and so on. So-called the lower end of the digitalization process. But as Vietnam integrated their own ecosystem and value chain, they started to move up that chain, right? Then the jobs or the projects for the lower end, they were then outsourced to places like Bangladesh and so on, right? So Cambodia, you already have a lot of good programmers. In fact, one Singapore company recently, following the SBF visit 2 weeks ago, is actually looking for a software engineer from here.
Oh, wow.
Not impossible, because there are already facilities, already organizations that are helping to build up this capability. I think David and his team has brought in School 42, for example, right? So that's another pathway that's being opened. So if Cambodia can also look at digitalization, the youthful demography, the advantage that many countries lack, you can then use it as a business process outsourcing. Even accounting and other services can be done here. Offshoring, what we call offshoring. So that brings me, sorry to take up too much time, but that brings me to the other part of the strategy, which I think Cambodia should also look at. There's this global trend which is called friendshoring, nearshoring. These are two elements that Cambodia definitely can leverage on if the right narrative is presented. And you already have a very solid narrative about political stability for the past 2 decades. Political stability, which very few countries in the world now, is a luxury, you know, right? It's a luxury. People take for granted, but you have that, right? And earlier, before this session, I mentioned about this Australian manufacturer who's seriously thinking about locating a manufacturing hub here, higher end, light to medium manufacturing here, right? That is testament. Now they recognize that in Cambodia is politically stable compared to other regional markets they are looked at, and they want to locate here. So BPO, outsourcing, looking at identifying which part of the value chain that Cambodians, younger generation, can play a part in.
David, I mean, in the garment industry, I mean, every year we produce and export billions of dollars of garment and footwear, right? I don't understand why we cannot have our own local brand. I mean, our seamstress, we have hundreds of thousands who are so good with their hand, all the needle and everything. Why? What is stopping them?
So there are definitely some locally developed brands, right? But definitely not at the scale, industrial scale, as all these big factory. So that's why it brings us back to this: how do we craft a policy of incentive to attract the right investment, whether foreign or local, to boost up this existing number of local garment brands that is actually selling well and receive due recognition, but you need to sort of scale them up, right? And this come back to, do we have a series of enabling policy from the government, and then let the private sector come in and do this sort of strategic betting by placing the money where they see will grow, and also create a kind of environment that would bring up the local garment branding. They are out there, quite a number of them, but we just need to help them upscale.
Back to agriculture again. I'm obsessed with agriculture.
Right. So
we have now very good in terms of market diversification. You know, China is one of our biggest source of importer, right? But we export pretty much raw material, right? Banana is, banana is a mango, that sort of thing. But in terms of processing, food processing, value adding, like making jam, making fruit juice, making fruit puree, these are the areas that Cambodia have a lot of potential.
Yes.
But it required high degree of SPS, phytosanitary. I understand that the machinery are quite expensive. Huh?
I think David mentioned before about processing agricultural products. It can be dried mango, dried bananas, and so on. But as I mentioned earlier, right, rather than recreating or trying to reinvent the wheel, there are already existing players out there along the entire value chain. So it's about attracting them in so that they can actually transfer the know-how, which when David mentioned about having a more progressive tax incentive framework, whether it's for SEZs or new investment into Cambodia, and that can be tweaked, right? If you're able to bring in a certain component of the value chain, that can already help with technology transfer. And the tax incentive can be such that if a new investor is able to transfer that knowledge, you get that tax incentive. Again, it's performance based, right? And then that will help. So while not everything need to be reinvented from scratch, tap onto the international ecosystem of manufacturing right now, and incentivize them to co-locate, to actually come in. You talk about phytosanitary requirements of different countries and so on. Here, I want to mention that there are two other aspects that is worth considering and relooking. Whenever we talk about exports, we always mention about EU as a collective, as a collective market, right? And then we talk about the US. But seldom do we talk about the ASEAN as a collective. Because if you were to crunch the numbers in terms of bilateral trade for ASEAN, it's not small change. But somehow when we talk about ASEAN, we tend to talk about them as individuals, like Singapore, Indonesia, and so on. And Indonesia, to its credit, it has increased the bilateral trade, right? But if you talk about ASEAN as a collective market, it is not small for Cambodia.
It's not small.
So that needs to be relooked at. Because when we talk about near-shoring, friend-shoring, that is one strategy they need to develop a little bit. Now, phytosanitary...
But don't we produce the same commodity, same product?
Yes and no, because in terms of certain products, for example, you look at Indonesia, if I recall, right? Indonesia is also buying rice from Cambodia. Right? Must remember that each member country in ASEAN or anywhere in the world, they always have their own geographical, political, governance constraints and so on, right? Indonesia has 20 over 1,000 islands. So when it comes to food production and so on, not so easy, right? And it's also about pricing, right? Whether you call it artificial pricing or whether there are certain mechanisms and so on. Certain countries will always find that it is better to diversify the different sources. But in terms of value add, for sure, you can learn from the Japanese, the Koreans, and some Southeast Asian partners about how you can gear up in terms of the value of your processed product. You mentioned about jam and so on, right? Now, even apart from the processed foods, we always talk about regional and international certification for export. Sometimes I feel I'm exasperated whenever we talk about the regional and international. Now, because I've always had this mindset, what is there to stop Cambodia from having your own national certification first? Because it becomes an intermediate step and is more achievable. But at the same time, you're socializing the large constituency of 90% of the businesses here are SMEs, right? Gear them up towards the national certification first, and then it's a shorter runway to your regional or international. It's quite a quantum leap, right? For MSME, for example, or some next generation family business trying to reorganize themselves. Yes, they aspire for the highest standard, but let's be realistic. Build step by step.
It's like in the cashew, we have a company from UK, buyer from UK, and they say, Cambodia do not have a BRC certified factory. But when I spoke to local Saran, he say, brother, it costs about $200,000, right, to maintain a BRC standard. And while we can only export $1 million or cashew, for example, how do you spend 200,000 just to maintain, the standard, right? So yes, you're right. You need. In fact, I think it's a great idea to start nationwide first, lower bar, and then get used to the system before jumping to the next level.
Exactly. Even if we were to create, like what Michael said, a national standard, national norm, right? You still need to train local SMEs to have the adequate skills and adequate equipment for the processing line to first meet the national norm. So this require maybe a little bit of flexibility from the government in terms of give them some specific incentive, right, for them to, like I said, it may become also a bit of money spending for them to retweak their production line and reskill up their manpower in order to at least reach the national standard. So if they can get some sort of incentive or tax exemption by investing into that particular thematic, this will help definitely on a step-by-step basis. So it's more a policy related on tax exemption for, again, related to TVET, but also related to up our standard.
Yeah. You can use, if I can use the analogy of the education system, right? In Singapore, for example, we have the primary and secondary before you go on to the junior college or pre-university and then the university, right?
Yeah.
We have our own standards. But at the critical juncture, we tap into, I'm not sure about now, but back during my time, it was the GCE, the General Cambridge Examination, right? And then you have, so we came in with our own PSLE, Primary School Leaving Examination. So that's like a national certification. You go on to secondary, and then you then qualify to sit and are more prepared for the international geared sort of certification. So if you use the same analogy, like what David has mentioned, whether it's the TVET, whether it's incentivizing them, they must see the incentive. If I can attain this national certification, then at least I have a better chance of attaining the higher certification.
And this also brings you to what I just said earlier, right? How do we really help our local players up the skills so that they can then be on par to become the local partner of foreign investors?
I mean, you mentioned, David, you mentioned quite a bit about more the role of the government. So, but how about the private sector themselves? I mean, you talk about upskill, reskill, you know, I mean, it's very skill specific to the industry, to the factory that they have, right? Wouldn't there be a need for a self-contained sector-specific skill training?
Again, back to what this Clayoma is doing, right? It requires a platform of PPP between private sector and government to help, again, up the skill for TVET. This Clayoma, they did it just for the automobile sector. But I'm sure for the other sector, we require the same model being replicated so that across the board, then we have a national sort of improvement or upgrading of the skills in general. So it's basically, like you said, private sector play their part, government also play their part, and takes two hands to clap.
It's sorry if I can just add on, it's definitely a symbiotic role between the government and the private sector, because private sector will have the financial means, the resources, and the motivation to do so, right? You already see that in some of the SEZs, right? Because the government play a role in having the single window, what's that called? Single window platform, right? To facilitate what the business activities, the export and so on, the investment within an SEZ. They also provide the QIP incentive and so on. Private sector would then move it by mobilizing resources, attracting the right manufacturers and so on. But it is now about recalibrating a little bit what role the government play. So the government will always play a strategic role, the role in terms of offering the strategic direction. Private sector will be always in charge of mobilizing, right? Now what we are trying to suggest is that the government should relook a little bit in terms of recalibrating the tax incentive, move towards more of performance-based, attract the right value chain in, be more sector-specific instead of free-for-all. Now that is where the private sector needs some, what's that called? Guidance. Because some, not all, some are more in a hurry when it comes to developing SEZ, right? To either lease, sell land, or just to offer factory spaces. It cannot be about factory spaces because then that goes back to low value, assembly, single product, manufacturing. You need value chain, which means the government needs to come in, offer the direction and the incentive, right? If you want to continue with the low value single product for the private sector, by all means go ahead. But those who support the government direction, I want now sector specific, like what PM has mentioned, is now pushing for the cashew industry, right? So if you want sector specific, build up value chain ecosystem, enjoy all the incentives if you bring in R&D, if you have a sub-component manufacturing support and so on, right? Then you join this one and you get all the rewards and what have you.
Yeah.
So industrial park will have to have that ecosystem he mentioned to add value.
So I want to shift a bit to the service sector, which to me that's where the strength of the Cambodian economy, particularly tourism, right? You know, in the context of this global uncertainty, the border issue with Thailand, the returning migrant worker, it does have a direct effect on the tourism industry. How do you see, you know, the sort of program for us to boost the tourism industry? Because we will have a brand new airport, Daejeon Airport, very soon. We will have a Siem Reap Airport. But what other initiative? We have the Tourism Development Board is a new entity. What else do you think we can do?
I think we have been debating a lot on that particular key incentive that a lot of countries practice, and we saw the result. It actually generates a lot more tourism, which is visa-free policy. But that's why I said we have been debating a lot. But however, whatever the argument for and against, we also seen, factually speaking, that other countries implemented that with relatively good success. So now, if we just put that aside, what are the other things that we could do? Like again, in the past, we were always bogged down with this old paradigm of low season, high season. So now we are starting to shift to a more, what we call, new term, right? Because if you
Green season.
yeah, green season. But if you look at what the neighbors have done very successfully, they never mention low season. For them, it's all year round destination, right? So now we shift to this green tourism, which is already a good step forward. But again, we will need to be a lot more forward thinking in how to participate all those industry-related events for tourism overseas.
Yeah, like for example, I mean, I revert back to your analysis that not many people understand the Cambodia. They have a lot of prejudgment, that sort of thing. How many of them know that we have 5-star, 6-star resort in island resort, for example? I mean, I think we have to promote Cambodia, not necessarily Siem Reap. Siem Reap is part of Cambodia, but not everybody, of course, if they've been to Siem Reap once, you're not going to go back twice or 3 times. You want to go to ecotourism, you want to go to Monogiri, and I keep discovering that, my God, we have other things than cashew. We have vanilla farm. I say, wow, how do they make vanilla? That sort of thing, you know. It's Cambodia have such a vast resource base, but how do we value add it? And the service sector, for sure, is one area. I still think, okay, in a couple of weeks I'm going to Adelaide to attend a big conference there. But I'm saying, you know, do we have a good conference facility in Cambodia?
We do not.
We do not. We have wedding hall, but it's not.
Mice.
Huh?
We don't have mice.
Yeah. We don't have a good a big conference facility, right? So when I go to Australia, I go for 2-day conference, but I will fly there early and I will stay an extra day. So basically, that's how you retain tourism,
Precisely.
right? So, I mean, in Phnom Penh, what are the tourism products? I think that we should beautify, our National Museum, because we have so many of the statue that we got back from overseas that was stolen. But now, I mean, we should have a Cambodia Louvre. You know, I mean, that sort of thing, you know, that people can go and explore, you know, the cultural aspect of Cambodia. They don't necessarily have to.
So I guess you just need to be a lot more pragmatic, but also a lot more creative thinking or outside of the box thinking. Like I said, the old paradigm has become outdated. Today we are living in a very fast, rapidly changing world. So we need to always try to come up with new ideas to adapt and sell our services, basically speaking.
You know, the paradox of the example that you gave about Siem Reap, right? You don't need to promote Siem Reap as much because Siem Reap is already selling itself, right? There's already international recognition. But the paradox is that you're right. If a visitor has gone to look at the Angkor Wat once, not a very high chance, unless they're resident here, to make another visit. But I have to support and reiterate a point that David brought up about the travel season. Because I always believe that whether it's in the manufacturing, whether it's in agriculture or any other sector, and in this case we're talking about the tourism as a subsector of services, right? It's a symbiotic relationship between the government, the role that it plays, which is to set the direction, the conditions, so that the private sector will be able to mobilize their resources. Private sector are as such, they are innovative, they are resourceful. Once you give them the mandate and the framing, they will know how to operate. Earlier, David mentioned about the travel season. Now we have moved towards coining it as the green season.
Green season,
This has been the bugbear since day one of my assumption of post in 2016. And I've shared this with many Cambodian friends and some policymakers. Why do you still call it a high and low season? Because if you start to understand that when you call it a low season, it's a ripple effect, not just for the industry, because you now need to migrate from Siem Reap or wherever are the tourist destination to another place when it's low season. Right? Hotels need to close if they are not able to attract the right visitors. F&B as well. So you will always be fragmented. You'll never be able to build the hospitality industry to the level the other countries have done. Now, at the same time, when you coin it as a low season, international visitors would not want to visit because they would think that low season means that, oh, it'll be storms, it'll be unsafe and so on, right? So you harken back, more than 3 decades back. Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, one after another, declared that their countries are all year round destination. No high season, no low season, no such thing.
You come anytime.
Even Japan is all year round. The only thing is that when you look at the JTB booklet, right? When you look at the hotel booking, they'll highlight in red if it's peak season. That means expensive.
Okay.
But then other colors, but they still very cleverly they'll use green to say that this is not really the peak season, but we are still open, right?
Still open,
So maybe that's how the tourism promotion board here has now used the term green. But still, when you declare it as a green season, it's still
the other season is brown.
Still a stigma.
It's stigma.
Why don't you just call it all year round travel now? When the government sets that mandate, that framework, I can tell you the private sector operators, hotels and all that, they will know how to respond. Trust them to be able to respond, and they will be able to help bring in more tours, more marketing. Like during the from this month to this month, you can have these activities. From this month to this month, if it coincide with the wet season, you can go to the waterfalls. You can do kayaking and so on. But then the government need to come in to help with some safety measures and so on, right? So that's what I mean by the symbiotic relationship. Government sets the tone, the direction, private sector respond. But if you constrain the private sector, in this case by calling it
low season,
green or whatever nomenclature that you want to use, then you're constraining the innovation of the private sector. So once you can do that, then you see a very different thing changing. The skills, the experience of the hospitality workers, they have greater assurance, greater stability, and greater upward mobility. Right? That is something that needs to be done in a hurry. And that is low level. You don't need committees to declare it. In fact, the Prime Minister himself can just say, I now declare Cambodia as all year round travel season. In fact, it's always been.
It's always been. You're right.
How to get rid of the stigma, basically, and let the private sector do what they do best. They will know how to operate, how to attract tourism, because this is how they make money at the end of the day.
Sorry, the other thing that you mentioned that I need to comment also about visa free. I know it's a very divided topic, but if we look at a simple paradigm, right? If you compare two possible destinations that I want to go, one, there's still a visa fee, or it's still a tedious process to apply for a visa, whereas the other one is visa free, right? Automatically you become a Hobson's choice. I will just go to the one that don't require a visa. Now, also, if the other destination maybe is known internationally as a bit more mature in terms of the hospitality, the tourism industry, then it becomes very clear, right? So Cambodia needs to get in on the game first. It doesn't mean that you'll be visa-free forever, but either you need to relook at the criteria, the conditions, and so on, and reimagine what it can be like. Now, if the starting point is that we are losing revenue, then I think it's very myopic because the tourism dollar and the downstream tax revenue and so on is tremendous. It's many times more.
Yeah.
So, but if the argument is always about, then we are depriving ourselves of the extra tax income revenue, then I think that should be revisited. But if it's for other reasons, like Singapore's case, Singapore cannot be overcrowded. Otherwise, there will be a domestic upheaval. Why I go to this shopping center, I can't even move and so on. Now, Cambodia doesn't have that kind of constraint. So you need to revisit the fundamental. What is it that's holding you back? Why are you so uncomfortable? Whether it's visa-free or lower visa fee or whatever. Need to relook at it.
Yeah, it's quite an active debate there, because from what I heard is that sometimes when you offer visa-free for a certain period, you entice the migration of some temporary worker to come to your country, and they work for so many months and then they leave. And the type of work that they do are not good work.
Then that comes down to, again, the collaboration with the government in terms of the role that they play, which is about enforcement. So you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? You know that the bathwater is dirty. You need to look at what is causing it to be dirty, right? You need to fix it. So in this case, if one of the byproduct of having a visa-free regime is that you attract the illegal or the unsavory visitor, then you can tighten the screw in terms of requirement. And that's what Singapore experimented with for many, many years. Why I know this? Because for more than 13 to 15 years, most of the time I was overseas, right? And consular. Processing of visa, entry requirements for foreigners and so on. I've seen how we have shifted. So the more sophisticated we are in the back end in terms of using technology to screen visitor, we are more assured that we are letting in the right profile. Those that could be possible illegal workers in the future or problematic cases, right? Then you tighten the screw in terms of condition.
Okay.
And because Cambodia, like I said, you are already so far ahead in terms of digitalization, adoption of AI even now in some processes, right? It can be used to better monitor. But the screening must be such that you don't necessarily need to close the door just because of one or two threats that you perceive. You need to fine-tune it a little bit more.
It could be also visa-free selectively on nationality.
Nationality or
you don't have to give visa free for everybody.
Or even background. Right? Once you apply, you can prove that you are professional background and so on. You are granted visa free for X duration.
Yes.
You want to renew it, show proof again that you are still gainfully employed and so on, right? So there are many ways that you can layer the protection.
Well, I mean, gentlemen, I think we have a very interesting debate ranging from agriculture to manufacturing to SEZ and lastly on the service sector. So we could go on and on. But I think, as always, time is a constraint. But I want to say to the audience that in the context of a country that is going through a period of global uncertainty from the tariff issue with the U.S., from the border clash with Thailand, and the uncertainty of the world, we have to be flexible. We have to think outside the box. We have to think creatively. How do we turn our economy to be more resilient. We have to think, not necessarily throw away the old traditional model of development, but we have to think what are the emerging dynamics, what are the emerging economics factor element, the advent of AI, for example. Who would have thought AI will come so rapidly? And so I think it's quite interesting that we, from the intellectual perspective, from my experience, we can try to analyze, to see, to share. And that's what I hope from this discussion, that we are able to provoke enough ideas. Of course, it's only idea. Right? Somebody, you guys out there, have to be able to pick up some of the idea and drive forward, whether you're in the garment industry, in the cashew industry, in the rice, it doesn't matter. But I think we believe that our job here in our discussion is only to provide ideas, and up to you, up to the people out there to say, I like this idea, I'm going to go forward for it. So on that note, Michael, thank you so much for coming and share some of your great ideas. David, it's always a pleasure. So we'll see you next time.